everybody, and welcome to another Kerfuffle webinar. We are delighted on a Friday. I'm as shocked as you are here, people. Friday morning is not one of my best times, but I would not have missed today for anything. So we have here today the depository and some of their finest partners, and indeed their clients. And as some of you smarter people will notice, one of them appears to have got so much efficiency savings from the depository that he's clearly been able to go to Maldives to do this breach. So we'll come to Ryan later, sickeningly trying to do his routine on the beach, Top Gun style. Let's kick off, though, in terms of, first of all, obviously, Christian, your good self. Stop, collaborate, and listen. The Vikings back with a brand new invention. Will you stop trying to go head-to-head with me and being the most ridiculous prop tech company on the planet?
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, Whaley.
The difference is there's actually some depth backing your business up. But anyway, how are you, sir? Anyway, you well?
Good, mate. Yeah, good. Busy, excited. Yeah, we're having some exciting times at the depository at the moment. So yeah, no, all good.
Okay, don't tease us. We're going to come on to that. Don't rush it. It's best to lie back and let the magic happen here, I find. Because his Wi-Fi is not going to hold up. I'm going to go to Ryan next. Ryan Wolfenden, leader Fox's finest. How are you, my friend? Actually, I don't know why I asked that. You're obviously sickeningly well. Brilliant. Thank you for your comments. We'll have more of that. He doesn't even know he's on to this. This is perfect. Chris Watkins, if you're watching, don't start getting smart-arsed about it. This is the guest messing this up, not me. Right, anyway, so we've got a wolf, a whale, and a Viking. It sounds like a seedy joke. I'm going to go straight to Kelly Wallace to bring some much-needed seriousness back to the occasion. Kelly.
No.
No.
No pressure for me. Hello, thank you for having me. My first time on one of these, so thank you for inviting me along.
Okay. I took that as a bit of a threat that you might not come back, depending on how today went. Yeah, just stick with it. We get to the good stuff eventually. Reagan, come on, cheer up. Come on.
I'm making miserable. Do you know what? Sometimes I forget you can all see me.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you doing?
Everyone's watching. Well,
I know. Because I did a podcast yesterday and I was overly animated in that and then realised no one could see me. I'm going to go the other way today.
Right, so just to put it back, I did the professional thing with Ryan at Leader Fox, Kelly from the TDS, obviously, or the sales manager there, Reagan from the fantastic Paramount Properties. That sets us all up perfectly and everything else. Now, I think we're going to talk, obviously, you're going to give us a bit of a background again, Christian, just to set... for people that haven't heard of the depository, just to give us a really brief intro there. But I did ask you, I like to set right at the start of the webinars like this, why people should stay to listen, apart from obviously learn fashion tips from PropTech's finest here. But I asked you, Christian, for a couple of standout stats, didn't I, in terms of on what you're able to, why people should pay attention. And you came back with a couple of them. And I like there was one that said over 70% of proposed deposit deductions are approved first time by tenants on the depository.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you for some context because I've learned from professional interviewers that that's really important here. And then secondly, you cut the end of tenancy admin down by at least 80%. Now that one, that even a simpleton like myself can understand. That's absolutely fantastic. And it's important to point out that although you're a relatively new business, you have been adopted by some of the very best agents, as we can see here today. So this is you're basing these facts, aren't you, on a really good sample of data now?
Yeah, so I mean we've probably processed about 4,000 tenancies now in the last sort of 16 months or so. And yeah, as you highlighted, I mean, we built the platform really to make agents' lives easier. I mean, that is the main goal, is letting agents ourselves, the end of tenancy process. Most of the research we've done is that on average, it's 3 to 4 hours work per tenancy, taking it all the way from booking a checkout through to deposit reconciliation or a dispute. And actually, if there's a dispute, that can easily add a couple of hours onto that as well. So it was just about removing a lot of the legwork for it. So yeah, our primary goal for agents is just to remove a lot of that work. Is very systemized, repetitive. A lot of tenancies actually progress relatively easily, even in a manual process. So what we wanted to do was just get the easy stuff off agents' laps so that they can deal with the more difficult deductions and the more difficult tenants and landlords, and that's really what our platform aims to do. So yeah, I mean, for agents wise, we reduce about 80. We're aiming at 90 within the next sort of 12 to 18 months. We want to get over 90%. But yeah, it's about massively reducing the workload on agents' plates so that they can focus their energies where it's really, really needed. And because we take a very sort of almost purely evidence-based approach with deductions in our platform, for agents that do things the way they should, that have the professional check-in, check-out reports, that get proper quotes in for deductions, that evidence their position on stuff. As you highlighted, about 75% of deductions are agreed within our platform with no renegotiation from the tenant whatsoever, because it's very hard as a tenant to argue with, here's your tenancy agreement, here's the check-in report, here's the check-out report, and here's the invoice to put right what you put wrong. It's a very, very difficult argument.
But Christian, just give me some context around that. What would that have looked like outside of the depository? What would be an expected kind of?
So I think for most agents, what that looked like was, you'd be called. Every agent has slightly different processes. So some agents sort of put it on the tenants and would just send them their clerk details and have them book it. Some agents did it in-house. I think Paramount used to arrange a lot of their checkouts, maybe still do, very much themselves to run that book of things. But then from the point the check-in report comes in, for most agents, that's a very manual process. So they have to deal with the meter readings to make sure the bills are closed off properly. They need to read through a checkout report, which can be anything from 10 to 60 pages, depending on the size of property and the level of furnishing. So for agents managing it, they've got to read through this massive document, type up all the findings in there to their landlord to say, right, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, here's the 15 issues we found in the report, and this is what we kind of suggest you might want to propose for each one. And it would be a very heavy email-based conversation back and forward. And then same thing, transitioning that over to the tenant. It would be sort of copying that over to a tenant, but reformatting it into a more tenant-appropriate language. And then for tenants as well, they would quite often get this really rather lengthy email that would have lots of bits and pieces in it. Quite often, agents wouldn't attach documents to that because a lot of these documents are big attachments, so you can't attach them to an email and send them out. So tenants would be expected to dig around for a check-in report that they maybe received 2.5 years ago and a tenancy agreement they've probably never looked at since they signed at the start of their tenancy. So it's just about making things readily accessible, and also emotion tends to creep into that. It's not uncommon in that email chain for there to be discussions about, if we hadn't had to chase you for rent for those 3 months, then we probably wouldn't be chasing you for this cracked mirror. But as you caused us hassle here, we're going to cause you hassle there. And, there'd be sort of little, or equally tenants would flip it on their head and go, I'd readily pay for that mirror that I broke, but because the boiler broke down for 3 days, I'm not willing to pay for it. And so it's about, another part of it for us is about removing the emotion, highlighting what a heavily regulated process we have. Since 2007, when the deposit legislation came in, it became a heavily regulated, legitimate space. But I think for many tenants, there is still this feeling that it is still a little bit the Wild West out there. That, yes, there's kind of this legislation that tenants kind of get, that there's something there, but they're still at the mercy of, really the attitude that the landlord or agent takes to it. And And often, as an agent, you're in this no-win position where the tenant thinks you're colluding with the landlord to rip them off, and the landlord thinks you're siding with the tenant just to make your life easy. And so you're stuck in the middle as this person who can't. Not always, there are landlords who appreciate what agents do and tenants who totally accept legitimate deductions. But there are those many.
Christian, there are also healthy people in Blackpool, but that doesn't make it. That's a minority as well, aren't they? Christian, I think that's a really good overview. And one of the things I love about the whole depository story is that you and Anne, in terms of how this happened, was you used to review, didn't you, within Base, the bits of the business that were causing strife, that were causing hassle, that were taking time. And from that evolved this need, actually, we need to create a solution, because clearly the CRM companies were just not really paying any attention in terms of focusing on a true solution in this area. And that's the wonderful element here, is PropTech often gets accused of being a solution for no problem, doesn't it? But yours was a very real issue, and that's why I've always said to you is you've never really had the concept of a minimum viable product.
No,
because you've known what it is. You've gone out such an early stage, and people like Reagan at Paramount and everyone else. I think Ryan's just gone to get his mojito, but he's back. He's back here in some format. But what you were just listening to there, Reagan, about Christian had to say, would you echo very much that kind of, just in terms of the transparency, I suppose, the efficiency side, the way it helps take the emotion out of it? Would you agree with Christian that that's been your experience?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think if anything, Christian is overlooking a huge part of it for us, which we weren't aware of. We signed up purely based on everything Christian has just said, time saving, all of those sorts of elements, quite a selfish gain, I suppose, in terms of freeing ourselves up, giving us more time. And actually what we underestimated is what we've gained from the service and what it's actually added to our offering. So I think, talking about the emotion piece, because you were just talking about it, we are gaining relationships at the end of tenancies, which we would have previously lost. So, we all know it can go sour. You have a fantastic 5-year relationship with a resident, you move out and it's horrible, it's awful. They're not going to come back to us, and it's not our fault. There's nothing we could have done about it. And actually the depository is it's a vehicle to allow that frustration, I guess, almost goes through there. I don't even know if sometimes they recognise that we're on the other end putting in the deductions. Maybe that isn't fully understood, but it definitely takes out an element of us against them.
Yes.
And so actually what we're having at the end of it are, smoother transitions and relationships, which are leaving us as a company, we're being held in, higher esteem than I think probably we would have with some of the more difficult ones before.
Reagan, do you think? I mean, we do all operate in I'm in many different bubbles, but in agency, we get caught up in terms of that. One of the biggest misunderestimates, as I can see it, is thinking that the great British public understand what's going on. In both, not just obviously we're talking about the letting side, but even on the sales side of things here. So you mentioned there, they always see the agents as the crux of the issues, don't they, and everything else there. Things like the depository can only help educate the audience slowly over time, can't they, about that, what's involved?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as Christian said, the deductions are so clear, and it's black and white. There's no maintenance issues, there's no rent arrears history, there's no poor communication standards, anything else that is usually brought in. That white noise is cleared, and it's just very in, out, deduction, page number, picture. You can't argue with it unless you don't agree that it is a damage in the first place, but you lose the ability to offset other negotiating factors against it, and it sort of hones in really on the issue. So you're cutting out the time, you're not having those difficult conversations. And I think they understand it a lot better because it's almost clinical in the way that it's done. And then, come the end of it, obviously, because now we can release the funds so quickly. And I think another huge part of it, if you rewind it slightly, obviously the part at the end is fantastic, and the negotiation and how the deductions are presented. But actually, right at the very beginning of the process, when we receive the notice in, the system allows us to set up those touch points and that correspondence which gets sent periodically between notice in and a resident leaving. So again, what we've gained from that is we look way more professional than we did because we're sending it out. We might send, you might, as a typical agent, I guess, you send the 1 or the 2 pager when you get the notice in. They don't read it. They're not leaving for 2 months. They're not bothered. To then intersperse that throughout that last 2 months, that's a lot of work. Most people aren't going to do that. We certainly didn't. But they get reminded, and they get reminded of their responsibilities. So nothing is a shock at the end. It's like we told you this was going to happen. We gave you plenty of notice. We offered help on how to do it. We offered to book cleaners, all those things. It just makes it seamless for them. And you're totally right. It educates them from the minute they hand in their notice. They know what's expected of them, how's it going to go, and how's it going to look.
Perfect. Reagan, I think you just mentioned they're seamless, and I think that gives us the perfect segue as well to talk about the next element here, Christian, in terms of, you obviously chose the TDS to obviously partner with. Just talk us through your thought process there, and then we'll come on to Kelly and get her views from the other side. Just talk us through that.
So look, I think as an agent, we all have those same frustrations. There are some great products and services out there, be they prop tech or a more human service, but how those products and services interact is really important. I think Reagan will agree with me here. As agents, I've seen plenty of great concepts, but because they're not plugged into anything else, it's like, well, really, okay, it looks nice, but for us internally, operationally, whilst it saves some bits and pieces in the middle of the process, what we have to manually as agents facilitate around that to communicate the information in and out of CRMs and to other partner providers, that's where the real frustration is. So, we knew with this product, launching it for starters, for starters, hold on, I'm going to reinvent lettings. For starters, we're going to, that's totally thrown me off my pitch now. That has totally thrown me. But look, the bottom line is it's about integrations. And so, we approached TDS because what we liked with them is, particularly at the time, they very much looked like, of the 3 deposit schemes, the one that understood the value of tech and innovation going forward. So we felt like there was a synergy with that. Their buy-in to our idea, literally from day dot. I mean, I think I emailed Steve, the CEO, who I'd never met in person before, and literally just emailed him directly, like, "Hey, been thinking about building this. What do you think?" And I think 5 days later, I was sat in a meeting with him and Nick, the CFO, and Ben, who at the time was head of TDS Northern Ireland and is now at the NRLA. So, that partnership was great. And what came off the back of that is the integrations that we've built. So we're pretty much fully integrated into the insured and custodial schemes. And, what is great about that is you finish a TDS deposit tenancy on insured or custodial within our platform, and the whole tenancy conclusion process is ended. So if it's insured, you reconcile the deposit funds, and then when in our platform, when you say basically finished, the API with TDS closes off that deposit registration certificate. So again, it's just one less dashboard that an agent has to go to. They don't have to finish it and then go, right, okay, now I have to go to TDS, find that certificate, close it off, input how the funds were reconciled. That all happens. Likewise with the custodial, when once any deductions have been agreed, our API then triggers that being passed over to TDS, and they literally take over the process from there. They'll validate those figures, reconcile the funds, and close off the deposit certificate. So again, it's that endpoint that we've resolved, and it's another dashboard, another platform, another task that agents don't have to worry about, and just happens seamlessly. And with what TDS are doing at the front end, they're really pushing their deposit registration API really hard with the CRM providers. So more and more of the major CRMs now have a deposit registration API. So actually, TDS are being incredibly forward in saying, you know what, guys, you might never need to use our TDS portal, actually, because you'll set up an account with us. If you're with a CRM that has our API, at the relevant point, you'll click the button and that will create the deposit registration. And if you're using depository at the back end, we'll manage that workflow, and then we'll close off your deposit certificate or generate your dispute file, you know, whatever needs to happen at the back end of that process. And again, you know, really, why does an agent need to go to a dashboard to facilitate those if it's a button within something? And that's what we're all aspiring to get to eventually, is these particularly in lettings, which you have so many service providers that slot in at different processes throughout the whole of that process. The more those elements can speak to one another, you know, I mean, we're currently working on our first CRM integration, and that's fascinating to see that, because, you know, looking at what that's hopefully going to deliver, you know, we're looking at the company we're working with that to roll out with, you know, they are still looking at 3 or 4 hours of process. With the integration, we're probably looking at those tenancies now going to average them 5 to 10 minutes.
I think it's just what everybody wants these days, isn't it? And I mean, the problem is agents get everyone does, and it's not just agents. You get very excited about, you can see the end goal of technology, and then you get the reality of, oh, what you mean? I need to double entry information, and it never really delivers. I always made myself incredibly unpopular with, well, just about everybody by describing people like Ryan and Reagan as high maintenance. But, you know, because they had the temerity to demand that this stuff should have been integrated. And we know that the CRMs have had a challenge there. But what I do love about what you've done, Christian, again, is that the integrations that I've seen today, bearing in mind how fresh you are those literally work out of the box, and people don't, you know, it's the best sort of one where you don't even notice what's going on in the background. That's great to see.
I think there's a couple of approaches we took from day dot, which was partially for agents and also partially selfish, because my thinking is, again, I'm sure Ryan and Reagan will 100% back this up. We've all had product demos where the salesperson doing the demo knows what that product can and cannot do, and is very adept at making the platform present in a way that maybe doesn't necessarily fairly represent what it can't do.
I can't figure out here, Christian, whether you're just about to have a dig at me. So I'm gonna move on very quickly here.
No. Anyway, but what I was going to say was, you know, building a product that works the way agents want and need it to work. It doesn't just make your agents happy. There's a selfish side for us. The better the product works, the less support requests we have to deal with. You know, like your comment on high maintenance is spot on the money. I know I have probably a much worse reputation than these two with suppliers. I've had some very funny chats with suppliers about, oh Christ, it's you.
Sometimes you even write letters to them.
Sometimes. But yeah, I think, you know, but our approach was, you know, agents don't come up with these hurdles. We don't make these suggestions because we're trying to be difficult, because we're trying to be high maintenance. It's because we do this job day to day at, you know, front lines, and we know, God, if we could click that button and it would do X, Y, Z, that is quite transformative for our businesses, you know. And for a small business, there's some benefit. But we look at the likes of Paramount with a very decent, healthy portfolio, and you know, you multiply that 5-10 times.
You get that scalability, that economies of scale, isn't it? I want to ask Reagan that later, but I want to bring in Kelly if we can do now, Christian. Christian mentioned there his rather cheeky approach there. You know, hadn't even really developed as a product. What convinced you guys that you should be partnering with a product that was so new to market? What was it that caught your attention, you know, to really give it, you know, undue attention at this stage?
Yeah, I think we could see the demand. So at TDS, we have things like member forums, and we really try to communicate with our customers to understand actually what they're thinking. it's all well and good us to sit there and think, oh, this would be a great idea, but we don't work, we don't do the day-to-day lettings. We only deal with deposits, which is such a small fraction of what you guys do. So we want to listen and be receptive to the ideas and the feedback that customers are giving. And ultimately, if we can streamline the deposit protection process, the end of tenancy process, make it easier for everyone, that's what we want to do. So when we do hear these kind of ideas and companies coming to us saying, look, this is an issue with my business, and if I'm experiencing this, hundreds of others are as well, what can we do about it? And that's where it kind of went from there.
And thank you for, and ultimately, obviously, as you said, is me and Christian and other people in our prop tech ivory towers. We can Apple-esque come out with this idea and then go, da-na, and we've missed something because we haven't engaged with the clients. Now, I shouldn't have included Christian at that stage, because I know he's been engaging with the agents at the earliest possible stage. But Kelly, from your point of view, from your mutual clients, what's the sort of feedback they're giving you?
It's all been extremely positive. So it's obviously a unique feature for TDS customers. So we've had multiple insured and custodial agents now using the product. And I think the proof is in the pudding with someone like Ryan, who wasn't using TDS, who actually made the decision to switch from another deposit protection provider over to TDS to be able to benefit from not only the features and functions of TDS more generally, but to be able to use the depository. So it's great to obviously have customers here who can actually voice how they found it, and hopefully, as Regan said, it's massively improved their business. So I think that's the best feedback that we could possibly hear.
Well, I was hoping we were going to be able to keep Ryan's down to a minimum because of legal issues, but I suppose at this stage now, I'm going to have to engage with him. You finished your fried breakfast, you've had your mojito, Ryan.
Yeah, sorry about that. It literally, my computer said it's too hot and just turned itself off. So
oh, look at all of us! Look at all of us being simple.
But yeah,
talk about it.
So we were using the DPS before. Weren't particularly happy with them, but for legal reasons, maybe best not to go to. So we were waiting for the TDS custodial integration, because I think Christian, when he first set it up, it was insurance based only. So I think I was one of the first custodial customers transfer, and I have to say, having done data transfers from CRM to CRM and everything else, I was fearing the worst, but it was fantastic. It was so simple. Didn't really have to lift a finger. TDS give you all the letters that you need to send to the DPS. It all kind of happened behind the scenes. Very, very, very little involvement from us whatsoever. The work for us in terms of data entry was as and when the new tenancies came to expire, put them on the system, so you kind of drip feed on. So there wasn't this massive headache of you get when you normally migrate from one system to another. It genuinely was seamless and very, very little input from the agency, so it was great.
So that's often thank you for that, right? I mean, that's often overlooked, isn't it? Is that there's a lot of fantastic, to be honest, products out there that do need a huge amount of customization. And
it puts you off. It's too much friction, isn't it? Is the pain worth it? Is the pain worth it? And there was no pain, and obviously the pain was worth it because we were ready to bear it. But I know for a lot of people, it's kind of like, yeah, it's a pain in the arse, but I haven't got the time, especially when we're also busy at the moment, haven't got the time to switch. Well, it didn't really take any time away from us from staffing hours whatsoever. So. Yeah.
Because Christian doesn't have any competitors at the moment, so it's not competitors that it will define the success of their business. It will be about that just natural intransigence of people to change from what they've already done.
Yeah. So how many people moan about something but don't change? Same with your bank, same with your accountant, same with all these things. You just think it's too much of a headache to move. So one thing I'd like to reassure is genuinely no headache whatsoever. And the process, once you're on there, is so much more transparent. That's what I love about it. Everything we try and do is about increasing transparency with the landlord, so they can see what's going on because they're involved in it as well, and the tenant. And I've obviously missed the bits and bobs when the computer was frying, but I heard Christian say about how can you argue with a bit of evidence? Well, sometimes you can, because we've always had the evidence before, but once you put it in a professional platform, it just seems so much more like they know what they're doing. as opposed to a bit amateur hour with emails backwards and forwards. Having a dedicated platform,
it's perfect.
You know, I think that really helps give it a bit more sort of gravitas and a bit more like, oh, they know what they're doing.
And I've been out with you many times and I've bored you senseless more times than we can count. But I say it all the time: is we're not being just judged by other property, prop tech and things like that, are we? We're being judged by the public's experience of other, just all other suppliers and tech partners, and so they are used to these dashboards and this essentially.
Especially now with Amazon and Netflix and Spotify, you know, all these sort of service as you go sort of products, and I think that's what I love about it. Is I think it just elevates our client experience for the tenant and for the landlord, and you know, that's evidenced by the fact that you've got a lot less disputes. You know, they're obviously agreeing to it because the experience is better and they agree with the, you know, how it's presented to them.
Because you've gone iteratively through every stage, isn't it? It doesn't create one.
Even the and again, I'm sorry if I'm sort of repeating what other people have said, but when it comes to the end of the tenancy, when it's about to expire, you know, it's those little bookmarks of telling them this is what we expect of you before you move out.
Yeah.
You know, here's how you can get your cleaning. You know, you can even add your own contractors in. Do you want to get quotes from our cleaning company? This is what we're expecting of you. So, you know, a cure, you know, it's better to have prevention is better than the best cure sort of thing. So we try and get it so that actually before we move out, they know exactly what's expected of them. And we did that before, but it was a bit more messy and not as systemized. And now with the depository, it's so much more systemized and consistent. And that for me is massive. It's easy to have one end of tenancy go well. This enables us to have every end of tenancy go well.
You just nailed it there. Well, unintentionally, obviously, you didn't mean to do it on purpose. Systemization is the key, isn't it? Systemization leads to efficiency, leads to scalability, and
a more predictable client experience. I mean, I don't have anywhere near the problems that Reagan has with the size of her portfolio, but I am super passionate about client experience. And for me, good client experience is one that you can tell them what's going to happen before it happens. And depository allows you to do that because you have clear signposts every step of the way of what's going on, and that for me is massive.
So if I whisper quietly though, so it's great that you can onboard really, really quickly, but sometimes business owners can be a bit guilty of dropping stuff on their staff. And if you don't take the staff with you, you might, as a business owner, have chosen a supplier for the best of intentions, but it just doesn't resonate. What's been your experience though with how quickly the adoption and how they got on board with the depository from your team's point of view?
Well, Christian's very lucky to have Carla as well, who's amazing, by the way.
The lovely Carla.
Yeah, but she has been like, you know, basically says to Vicky, my property manager, you need me, you pick up the phone. And which is great for me as a business owner as well, because then Vicky doesn't have to get me involved. She can just go to Carla direct if she's got any questions about usability, sorts it. And
she keeps getting the international ringtone.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But sadly, WhatsApp you can still stay them about, can't you? You need to change the settings and that. But no, it just meant that I doesn't have to interfere with my time. Vicky can speak to Carla direct if there are any things that she doesn't know how to work. But Vicky likes it because it's less work, you know. That's ultimately what the thing is about. And obviously, with Christian having a big lettings background, you can tell that when he's created the software. You know, I always think of software created by someone that knows what they're doing. A bit like when LetMC started, you know, it was created by letting agents for letting agents, and it's the same sort of principle. You know exactly what we do, and you know that the end of tenancy process, I reckon, hands down, is the biggest ball ache of any letting agency. And to reduce any kind of, you know, stress, workload is going to be greatly received by the staff. And Vicky really likes it because it's just tap a few things in, get sent out to the relevant parties, and it's super simple.
So it helps when somebody's selling a letting product, for example, knowing what a tenancy is, for example, when. But you know, let's ignore my demonstration to you all those years ago. Anyway, Reagan.
Well, you did pass it over quickly. You quickly said, "Oh yeah, you need to speak to Amy."
I'm very good at saying, "Here ends the demonstration. Let's get to the pub or the restaurant."
America.
Reagan, is that true as well from your point of view, in terms of the ease of onboarding and the way that the staff were brought with you in that whole process? Do you echo what Ryan had to say? What was your experience?
Yeah, 100%. It was super easy, and the support element of any supplier that we work with is really important, more important actually than ever, because we've had such bad experiences with different suppliers on it, and it just makes or breaks a relationship and our ability to use it. So, if you have an issue with the depository, or something isn't working, or it doesn't do something, do you know what? It's less important, because actually I've got no issue in just dealing with Carla on it because she's so helpful. It's like, a lot can be covered over with great service, do you know what I mean? And the product's fantastic. I'm not saying there are any issues, but for us, when we're looking at a supplier, that's one of the things that is key for us, is, are we going to be able to reach somebody? How helpful are they going to be? The response times, things like that. And so from the very off, that was like a huge box ticked for us.
And of course, being able to look on a certain Pink Review website and see real agents giving real reviews is it's just invaluable these days.
100%, of course. But no, the team loved it. It was easy to adopt, and it's simple as well. If you look at the actual interface of depository, which actually is true of, I would say, most of the core supporting pieces of tech we're using at the minute. Actually, what they have in common is they're idiot proof. They are, it's click it, but it's so easy because it needs to be.
I don't know if Reagan, I don't know if Christian told you that, but he invited down the powerful and the best that there were in lettings to the unveiling, and as an afterthought, because there was a spare seat, he invited me down. But what I loved about it was
whale proof.
It was whale proof. The reason why, whatever success I've had, if I get it, everyone gets it. And I can sit there, and when you can see a UI, a clean UI like that, there are other ones out there, the likes of the Spectres of the world, those systems that have just really thought this through, haven't they? And you get it. It's almost like there's no way you can go wrong. I'm sure that's not true, but it feels to me just such a natural flow.
There's nothing unnecessary. There's no unnecessary input of information. That's something which always grinds the gears with the team, is sort of filling in reams and reams of information that isn't even relevant. There's none of that. It's very to the point, what we need, and they'll take the bare minimum and do the most with it. And for us, that's always the most important thing.
To me, I mean, it's a no-brainer, obviously, because Christian's fitting a place in the life cycle that no one else has paid attention to. In fact, Mr. Lettings himself up here, Robert May, makes the point. He says, isn't it telling that the end of tenancy functionality is not in proprietary CRM systems? Now, telling a little bit about this is it was because I think it was such a tricky area. There wasn't any demonstrable big wins, I think, and I don't think this is a reason to give them an excuse, but it had to come really from an agent, didn't it? It had to come from somebody like Christian, who just said, no, we've got to find a solution for this to make that happen. But I was saying it was a no-brainer, Reagan, for people like Ryan, who's obviously got a smaller portfolio than like. But for companies of your size as well, where I'm assuming it's made a big difference in terms of the number of emails and calls and things like that you just fly back and forth with.
Yeah, hugely. There's also, I guess what we haven't spoken about is the let-only rent collection element of it. So we don't do let-only, but for our rent collect owners, where we don't get involved in that deposit release, first of all, we're reducing the need for them to come to us and discuss it with us. We're already out of that situation, because we're not even sending you the checkout report for you to then email back and say, hey, what do you think? It's not managed, sorry, you need to deal with it. It all goes through the depository. So we eliminate any of those inquiries where we are put in that awkward position of, we want to help, but you're not actually managed, and that sort of conversation. And it's, again, something we're gaining from it is the ability of, when we're going out and we're meeting with owners like that, is to be able to say, hey, you have free use of this fantastic website, which is going to make your lives much easier at the end, because it's the part that they hate the most as well. Yes. So, for those that we just aren't going to drive over to management, where we would normally use the checkout as as a good sort of lever on to get them onto the management service. We've got loads of owners who are going to be running the portfolios themselves. We've accepted that, so we'll help you do that as well. So the time that is taken dealing with those types of people is reduced. As an idea, we had, I think when we first onboarded the depository, we had 4 or 5 property managers using it, who would previously have all been individually dealing with that notice process and the checkout process. And that is all now streamlined as part of one person's job.
Yeah, there's Carla shouldn't need to be making any prospecting calls for the next few days anyway. So anyone watching this, just make sure you reach out. As ever, we always say, obviously, you can go to the depository on Kerfuffle or reach out to them direct. There's a fantastic deal up there that Christian's done for Kerfuffle members as well. So make sure you go on there, look at further information, look at those reviews I spoke about. I think it's always great to see. As you know, we don't do anonymized reviews, so these are always peers within the industry that some of them you will respect, some of them you may not in there. I think I find it fairly telling as well where you get some of the biggest names in terms of on the supplier side. So here we are, inventory base come in, such a brilliant and simple idea. The reporting journey is now so much more straightforward and seamless for clerks and users of inventory base and depository. Another of your great integrations there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we've plugged some bits in. I think a massive part for us as well is about the fact that we have to keep moving forwards. We never wanted to roll out a product. In my mind, there is no such thing as a perfect product. So no matter how good you think your product is at release, you should still be looking at that.
Tinder's pretty close.
But you've got to think. What we launched about 18 months ago, we've rolled out 240 alterations to our platform in that time. We're just in the final testing phase. We're about to roll out a whole a new interface for the deductions panel to rework that. It's really interesting you brought up inventory base, because we're also learning as we go along. So one thing we were really excited about early doors was to integrate with inventory partners, and that's what we've done. Inventory base, Inventory Hive, and No Letting Go. We're really proud to have delivered an integration with all of those guys, and that was a really exciting leap forward for us. But what was interesting for us is that presented new challenges. So we've got a lot of agents using those integrations. To be totally transparent, some are absolutely loving it. Some have switched it on. And because what our integration does is it captures every tenant, either directly tenant liable or questionably tenant liable deduction out of a checkout report. Now, what we've learned from that is with some inventory clerks, that's fine. An agent does that and it imports 10, 15, 20 dilapidations. We've had some agents switch on that import function, the API, and they've had 80 or 90 dilapidations land on a single tenancy interface. Now, we are solving a problem, but by doing that, we've potentially created a new one, because that's massively overwhelming. And the reason it's doing that is, the letting agents watch this will know, you have a 4 or 5 bedroom house. If you've got a detailed inventory clerk, just scuffs on walls. You think how many times an inventory clerk will report a scuff on a wall and question if that's legitimate wear or tear or damage. Now you capture all of those as individual itemized things, which is what our platform currently does. And yes, we're capturing it from the inventory, but now you've got to curate this epic list. So we've delivered that integration, great, and some agents it's working fine for, but that's now forced us back to the drawing board. So we've now designed new sort of batch functionality. So we haven't actually deployed this yet, but so when that 80 or 90 deductions come in, we've designed functionality so a property manager can scroll through that list. And using the example I gave, let's say there's 30 wall scuffs in there. They could tick all 30 boxes and they'll click a button, merge charges, and it will pull those 30 things into a single deduction, pulling all the inventory reference points, all the photos into a single deduction. you know, and keep on moving that forwards. We've done a mock-up. We've had a chat with probably about a third of the agents who use us, and we've shown that. And again, that paid off dividends, because we originally conceived that as just for merging stuff. And then we had a couple of agents go, oh, well, do you know what would be really cool is if we could also do a batch delete, which we hadn't even thought of. And it's like, yeah, of course. And you know, as developers, building that technology to add a delete functionality to that merge functionality is actually really easy. But that was a really good piece of feedback. You know, if we'd gone, great, that's cool, let's build it, let's roll that out, we would have missed a massive plus there.
I think this is exactly why, as a client, we love the depository, though, and it's obviously the benefit of being in its infancy is that sort of responsiveness. And you can see how passionate Christian is about making it as good as it possibly can be, for selfish reasons as well, but also for us agents. And I think, as an agent owner, how frustrated we get with some CRMs and other businesses that don't evolve, don't try and get better, don't try and improve the journey.
You stop bothering, don't you, Christian? I mean, sorry.
Once you get to Whaley's paycheck size, yeah, everything else.
Well, it's and that really.
And it's lovely to see, isn't it? You can see how passionate he is about wanting to make it as good as it can possibly be, and you know, and I love that, because that's what we want.
Again, whisper it quietly, and again, he's not doing it from a charitable point of view. If you've got fantastic businesses like Paramount, like your good self there, you would be insane to listen to ignore the innovation that you
are. Well, there are a lot of insane businesses then by that logic, aren't there? Because not everyone goes to the level, but not everyone goes to the level that Christian goes to, and I think you know, it's great. And if we can save 90%, you know, 80% great, and he's getting to the sort of marginal gains now. But if he's talking, his aim is to save 90% of any tendency, I think there's going to be a lot of happy property managers there.
Well, people just need to run that again. And this is the thing, is they do need to take a bit of time out, that helicopter view, don't they? Look at what would that actually mean to their business. You know,
staff will be happier. You'll get better retention, I guarantee, because it is the worst part of the job, arguing over tenant deposit, because you are an agent stuck in the middle. You gain nothing from it. You've got the landlord shouting at you, the tenant shouting at you. If you can save that part of the job, the staff are going to love it. And if the staff love it, then you'll reap the benefits of the owner. So, yeah.
I felt like I was going to give a shout out there and say, look, it's so obvious, I'm going to give a Whaley money back guarantee if you go with it. And then I thought, no, maybe not. You know, a corporate will come on board or something like that. Anyway, it is literally that. It's just obvious, isn't it? But anyway, Ben Sellers, the Fantastic Scarby, another company that knows a little bit about listening to its clients and doing things brilliantly. Two-way integrated rock, so does the Viking. The now officially titled Lovely Carla. The feedback from our clients who have migrated to TDS has been nothing but positive. Process seems extremely slick. That's great to see. And again, inventory-based jump back in. That's why PropTech is such a fabulous innovation in its own right. Frictionless reporting, seamless integrations, and intuitive workflows would just make sense. And what else is? I love that quote here from Ryan about every single tenancy going well and following exactly the same process because of systemized. I think that consistency is a key one. As you said there before, Ryan, if it's an experience based on somebody sending emails back and forth and everything else, sometimes when they've got, you know, lots of time to spend and they've got the right person, that's going to be a 10 out of 10 experience. Sometimes when it's a less experienced person, they're in a rush, it's going to be lower than that, isn't it? And that's
also emotional for a lot of tenants and landlords. And I think sometimes sending long emails, you can misconstrue the tonality of what's being sent, and having a dedicated platform that just takes that emotion away from it and says, here are the facts, I think really helps it to be a bit more of an objective process than an emotional one. And I think that's a really good achievement as well.
I think there's an absolute psychology with a platform, right? And I've talked about this before. And as Ryan just said, you could get an email which could convey exactly the same of what our platform does. But email is evil because it is read in the way of whatever the mood of the recipient is at that time. If they are having an angry day, you could write the most, you know, I've written some of most well-intentioned, I'm giving you lots of help emails, only to get a reply of, how dare you send me an email like this?
You sarcastic bastard.
You know, and so email is difficult like that. But there is absolutely a psychology with an app, with a platform, with the consumer. As we touched on earlier, now tech is such an integral part of every part of our lives, and increasingly so. You know, you've now got your Gorillas and your Wheezies with the 10-minute grocery deliveries, and you've got delivery for food and all this sort of stuff. And when you're presented with a digital interface that takes you through a process, you don't question that process. You just accept, oh, I have to click this button, I have to upload this document, I have to complete this task, because it's basically like a boring computer game, right? You have to complete those steps to get to the finish line. You could convey exactly that same thing in an email, and you'll get a tenant going, oh, well, I've never had an agent ask me to do that before. And yeah, you know, you'll get all these question things, and it could be an identical process, but just simply because it's a process where they have to do this to go through the process, there isn't that question. It's like, oh, okay. And it's also, I think part of that psychology as well. I think what tenants fear most about the end of tenancy process being done the old-fashioned way is every tenant thinks they're being treated differently to the other tenant. They think you're somehow singling them out to be a bit nasty and be a bit difficult and be a bit awkward, which is almost never the case. But when they're presented with the platform, not only do they know they have to do this to go through, but they accept that every tenant is having to click that button. Every tenant is having to upload that document. They're not being singled out because that platform is not going to treat each tenant individually. That platform's not going to have a vendetta about a tenant who was really difficult in the middle of a tenancy. It's going to treat them in the same way. And so, you know, that's where, if tech, if it's done right, you know, removes a lot of friction that agents try with the best of intentions. I mean, Ryan and I know Reagan with Paramount would have tried lots of processes. For us at Base, you know, we tried all sorts of ways to educate tenants about, you know, the end of tenancy process. We tried videos and documents and letters. And like Reagan said, you send a tenant a 2-page document explaining moving out process 2 months before they move out. They're not going to bloody read it. And even if they do, they're not going to remember what's in there 6 weeks later.
Just because you broadcast something on email doesn't mean it gets read, does it? Doesn't mean it gets read.
I never read yours, Whaley.
That's because I'm overly verbose, but that's a completely separate show. Thank you for that. Guys, I want to wrap it up now because I think we're hitting that stage there. But I just want to get just the final comments there. So, Christian, from your point of view, in fact, I'll come to you last, actually. Reagan, from your point of view, I guess the message is clear, simple. It's been demonstrably successful for you as a business there, not least because of the scale there, but really, as you get across as well, right from day dot, it started, you know, from the moment you install that. What advice would you give to people thinking of the depository as an option?
I think have a conversation with them, because Christian and Carla, both and between them, will just allay any fears you've got. It's just, you know, you're talking to an agent, like you said. You're not talking to somebody who is going to deliberately gloss over the grey areas and what it can't do. They'll be super honest about what it can do, how it's going to work. No, it doesn't do that yet, but we're working on that bit. Or, you know, X, Y, Z, you know exactly where you stand. And there's nothing to be afraid of. If you're not happy with the way that your process is going, and you can't be unless you're using this, in my opinion, then you need to speak to them.
Perfect. Okay, Ryan, from your point of view, any advice you'd give to people thinking about onboarding? Is there anything you'd have done differently, or just is it a case of just listen to what Carla and Christian give you advice and trust it? You've been through this before.
Yeah, I genuinely think it's a no-brainer. I mean, Paramount are probably, definitely are for me the best letting agency in the UK. If they're using it and they're happy with it, that should be everything that you need to know about whether it's going to work for your business or not. And I'm a much smaller business. We manage about 150 properties. So if it can benefit my business and it benefits the best business in the UK, then it will definitely benefit.
We've got both ends of the spectrum, and that's really important.
Yeah, exactly. Little me.
Okay. And Kelly, from your point of view, I'm guessing this feels like it was it feels just like one of those partnerships you look back on and just say that was the really right thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's only going from strength to strength. And obviously, any customers out there that aren't currently using TDS want to benefit from the depository, let us know and we can help you through that whole process.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'll leave it to the Viking to wrap up here. You must be quite pleased to have heard these people giving their full, honest views on your little baby.
Yeah, I think the nice thing that came out of some of the comments that Reagan and Ryan have said today are things that we aspired to do with the platform, and primarily it was two big wins, which was save agents time and effort and hassle, improve job satisfaction, systemize, automate. But for the consumer, bring a cleaner, more transparent, more trustworthy process that leaves that impression of the brand, and it was great to hear Reagan earlier talking about that feedback that they've had from tenants. And we've had other agents, say similarly as well, that by and large, the tenant feedback particularly is phenomenal. And we've actually got one agent on board, which was a great story. The property manager at this agency actually used our platform as a tenant with one of our other clients and loved it so much. She was like, we need this in our business. And she literally contacted us and was like, just been through your platform with such and such. How do I do a demo? And they were literally using the platform within 3 or 4 days. And that for me, I mean, hearing Reagan say it, that's one thing. And again, also actually like having a tenant contact us and be like, yeah, this was amazing. Yeah. That for us is real sort of proof of what we've built. And we're going to keep tweaking it. We're going to keep improving it. So, if this is where we are after 18 months, I'm really excited with what we're going to be doing for our agents and their landlords and tenants in the next 12 to 18 months time. Perfect.
And all unveiled, obviously on Kerfuffle to keep me in a job, basically, which is really kind of. Christian, thank you for your views. I really appreciate everyone's time today, not least Ryan, because obviously he's got the pool to go to now. That volleyball won't hit itself. Christian, yours is the only product I've ever heard seeing a live product demonstration that made them compare you to God for having created it. So
that was a rather nice bit of feedback. That was a good one.
If you hear Simon Wales saying it's a bit OTT, you've got something special. I thank you all for your time today. I will leave the last word to David Mintz, my consigliere. Finally back together. Everyone, have a fantastic day and a great weekend. Cheers,
guys, thanks for your time today. Thank you.